Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're going to be taking a look at The Gardens of Ynn by Emmy Allen. This is a review copy that I was sent, and it is a print-on-demand book from DriveThruRPG. As usual, there will be links down in the description below where you can check it out for yourself. So Emmy Allen is an old-school writer, and the previous thing that she's written is Wolf Packs in Winter Snow, which is a really fascinating little book that takes Lamentations of the Flame Princess and adapts it for a prehistoric setting. A lot of really interesting mechanics and ideas in there. She's also developed a war game called The Dolorous Stroke that looks absolutely fascinating and that I really want to try out at some point. It's a miniatures game, but there's some like story game elements, and it's set in a fictional version of Arthurian England. It all looks really interesting, especially since I don't know that much about war games. But anyway, let's get back on topic. The Gardens of Ynn is a pocket dimension. It's a little setting that you can use and plug into any D&D or fantasy-like game. If your players want a little change of pace and they want to go somewhere weird and different, you can send them to the gardens. Here is our back cover. The font on the back cover is a little bit difficult to read due to its coloring. Let's take a look at what we get inside here. It's a garden of surreal delights designed for use in old-school role-playing games and their modern cousins. It's very procedural, the way that the whole thing is designed, which I find really interesting. It's almost like a little mini game, because the intended way that this is supposed to be played is that you don't map out anything ahead of time. Instead, once you venture into Ynn, you randomly generate what the next location is, because the whole gardens are weird and surreal and they rearrange themselves. So every time is going to be different, and you're going to be rolling randomly for your next location every time and generating a map as you go along. All of the art in here is from public domain artists, and a great sense of taste has been applied here. There's a lot of great Art Deco-like styles, a lot of art that reminds me of the colored fairy books that I grew up reading. I think there's some art taken from those, and just a lot of great Art Deco styling. How do you get to the Gardens of Ynn? You can get to it via any wall that you can draw a door on and say a specific passphrase or write a passphrase on. And there are ways that you can roll up a rumor for how players might know this. But of course, you can create whatever you want, any way that you'd like to get to Ynn. So Ynn is basically this weird garden dimension. It reminds me a little bit of a Red and Pleasant Land in the sense that it's full of, these topiaries and manicured gardens and statues, but there is a sense of dread and foreboding and weirdness, especially as you get deeper and deeper into that dimension. Now, a nice twist that Ynn has over the typical OSR games is that it's not very grimdark. There's a lot of brightness, a lot of whimsy and color to the setting, although there is plenty of weirdness and horror as you push further and further in and things get stranger and stranger. But just visually, at least in your mind's eye, it paints a very different picture than the typical stuff that you see. So basically, when you enter Ynn, you roll on a table of locations to see what you find, and then at each location you can either stay where you are and you have to roll for new events if you stay there for a turn, or you can go deeper, so you can push a level deeper into Ynn away from the door, because the further away from the door you get, the stranger things become. Or you can go back and backtrack, and as you explore, you are rolling up new locations and connecting them with lines, so you're drawing a little map as you go. So it's a little bit like a point crawl. But what's really interesting is that as you go deeper, you always add the level that you're going to the D20 roll to see what the location is. So the actual table of locations, which we're going to get to eventually, has, here we go. So your table of locations, it has 35 different entries. So when you first enter, only 1 through 20 is going to be available. But as you push deeper and deeper, more and more of the locations are going to become possible. This allows her to control for the types of things that you're going to see. Every time you go to a new place, like I said, you roll for location. You also roll for details. That adds a twist to the place that makes it a little bit more interesting and keeps every place different. So it's unlikely that you're going to find the exact same place twice. Even if you find 2 orchards, there's going to be something different about them. And you're also going to roll for events to give it a little twist. And you can also roll for encounters. So there's lots of variety that's going to be thrown at you here. One great thing about these tables is the way that it has a page reference right afterwards. So you can immediately look up which page to find more information about that thing. That's a smart decision. So the whole book is basically these tables right here. So it's just fleshing out what the locations are like, what the details are like, on the encounters. So this is the whole engine right here at the front. I would probably print these out and maybe find a way to get them all on one sheet of paper or something, and then just use that to basically run the game. Manicured lawns, orchards, ponds. Things start fairly straightforward at the beginning, though there are lots of weird little tables that you can roll on that make them stranger. It's very OSR in the sense that there is a lot of variety in the types of places that you can encounter, and there's tools and weird effects, tricks, and traps that are going to encourage player creativity and encourage player planning. Hot houses. For example, they might have poisonous plants, tables and chairs now rusted over. So this huge garden dimension has been mostly abandoned by its original owners, who are called the She. And the She are basically, the way it's described is that as elves are to humans, the She are to elves. So they're like elves, but much more so. They're almost like alien in their beauty and strangeness and incomprehensibility. And they have been mostly killed off, and their dimension has been devastated by this mimemic virus that has taken over everything, and which you are going to have to be wary of as well. Traveling through the Gardens of Ynn is a dangerous proposition. There's lots of very horrible creatures that you can run into, a lot of possibly deadly encounters, as is typical in OSR adventures. But survival is definitely possible if you are clever. You can also occasionally run into other adventurers who may be stranded there, because the doors leading into Ynn don't last forever. They're going to disappear unless you get back quickly enough. And if you play your cards wrong, you can get lost in Ynn and have a very hard time getting back again. We have towers, cemeteries, fire pits, mushroom beds. So as we go on, things are going to get stranger and stranger. The mask gallery, full of a lot of weird masks that you can find. For example, the Reaper, ivory, a human skull, stylized. The wearer deals 3 more damage whenever they deal damage, and suffers 3 more damage whenever damage is done to them. Small animals, insects, and so on tend to lie down and die peacefully around them. We have the splicing vats, which is a great example of a type of location where players can tinker. And I love that sort of thing in dungeons or in any kind of setting. Any sort of machine or situation where there's tons of possibilities and players can play around with it and try and make it do something. I love that. The vivisection theater, the electrodyne thicket, the winery, and finally the ruins of Ynn. Once you go far enough into Ynn, you just enter this area where there's just all sorts of weird, horrible things. Reality begins falling apart because the dimension is unstable and is no longer cohering. Getting into some location details, so things you add in order to spice up a particular location you find. Graffiti with lots of different possible examples, all of which can give you good information or clues as to how to deal with your surroundings if you're relatively new to Ynn, though of course there's a little bit of misinformation in there as well. Dead explorers, you can loot the bodies. Glass tubes, steel frames. There's a lot of great surreal little touches in here, and the way that she takes a garden dimension and then adds weirder and weirder twists on it. She skeletons, chasms, so floating. So like an inverted location, this one is suspended over the yawning abyss. Because if you dig deep down into Ynn, eventually the ground just stops and there's an abyss deep below. It's just like this gray mist, and if you fall into it, you're just gone forever. So this one is suspended over the yawning abyss. The location is made up of floating islands of turf and concrete that hang suspended in midair, unmoving. So if you roll up a location like mushroom beds, you could have floating mushroom beds. And suddenly those two things together create a new type of situation for you to deal with. The place might be smoldering, entrancing, hypnotic, zero gravity, full of parasites. You can find doorways out. And there's a bestiary here for all sorts of weird new monsters. Some of them are fairly straightforward, black cats, but we also have emerald serpents, hopping lanterns, that's very Studio Ghibli. A bottle hermit crab. Plant skeletons, I love this one. It's a skeleton interwoven and animated with vines and creepers. So the skeleton is just a framework. The real creature is the plant sprouting from between its ribs. And as it kills creatures, they can also return as new plant skeletons. The walking hive, the bonsai turtle, hybrid beasts, peahawks, white apes. Those are classic monsters from Barsoom, I believe, originally. But I love how every OSR book loves to include white apes. It's like a little Easter egg. Basilisks, floral spiders, chess sets. This is a great little monster. Again, reminds me of A Red and Pleasant Land a little bit. So a chess set is a literal chess set. It's a full 16-piece set. Of course, they're larger than normal. And each of the pieces has their own personality. And they have specific tactics that govern how they move. And of course, it relates to actual chess. For example, a rook is a solid defensive type, tasked with holding and maintaining territory. Carved with elemental stone to resemble a warrior in plate behind a huge shield. And so on. So it has little rules here. Grants its AC to any adjacent chess pieces. Can make a free smash attack against anybody who attacks a non-rook chess piece when the rook could have been targeted instead. Of course, when I was reading this, the thing that immediately popped into my head is, if I was playing this on a grid, I would just probably use these chess pieces like chess pieces, right? Get out an actual set of chess pieces and maneuver them on the grid the way that chess pieces do. That might be a fun twist. But really, if they're actually big hive minds that are all working together and just acting out these dramas of a court, even as they're fighting you. Frog servants. And you can see the impeccable taste here because there is a questing beast monster. It's probably the first questing beast in a bestiary that I've seen in an OSR book. I'm sure there's more, but that was really fun to see. Also a Jabberwock. Worms, unicorns, empty robed ones, and the idea of thorns, which is the thing that destroyed Yin originally. You don't want that to get back to Earth or to your home setting. We have the Shi, who are occasionally still around, although they are all irreversibly insane due to the damage done to their dimension. And at the very end, we have useful tables. This is great. This is just a little toolkit that gives you a whole bunch of little tables for adding more flavor, adding more details if that's something that you want, right? Horticultural styles, unusual flora, some Yinian alterations, because there's a lot of mutation is definitely a theme in this book. So this is a great little table for throwing more of that in there. Cosmetic alterations that can happen to you. Lots of weird new treasures. So for example, magical powder, which when scattered on water causes it to instantly freeze to solid ice. I'm sure there's lots of interesting ways you could use that. Some new weapon abilities. I search the body. Every OSR book needs something like that. And a number of tables for searching the flower bed, storing food, foraged food, because you might be there for a while. You may need to actually find food if you want to survive. Rumors, dreams, and portents. Finally, we have a class that you can use if you are in Yin for long enough that you die and you need to replace your character with a new one. It's hard to have a fictional justification for how a new guy just shows up. I suppose you could use the excuse of having another adventurer that was also trapped there show up, but you can also now unlock a new type of character class while you're in Yin. That's really fun. And there we go. So that is the Gardens of Yin. I love how compact it is, and it's so focused on doing just what it intends to do. It's a garden, pocket dimension, run by ancient elves, and is full of treasure, but is also very weird and has a lot of quantum uncertainty in terms of where things actually are. So as you explore it, you discover it for yourself. The main downside, I think, would be that in some cases, it might be a little bit time consuming to run it in real time. I haven't actually tried to run it in real time yet, so this is just speculation. But if you're rolling up a location, rolling up details, rolling up encounters that you find, and so on for each place the players go to, it seems like there would be a little bit of a pause in between locations to generate some of this stuff. So probably a thorough read of the book would be really necessary ahead of time. And maybe what I would have liked to see is some of those location descriptions just made a little bit tighter, more bullet pointy. It would take away from some of the prose, which is quite well written, but it may help a little bit in terms of running it on the fly. However, by and large, it's really well put together, and it's very easy to read, so I don't think that you would have too much of a hard time coming up with stuff on the fly as you roll up new locations. And some people might want to actually generate everything ahead of time to save time and to avoid that problem. But, that would also take away from the surprise that the game master gets to have at discovering what's going on along with the players. So there's some pluses and minuses there. That's it for this review today. I should thank especially my patrons for helping to support the channel, especially Owen Edwards, one of our newest patrons, who's supporting at a high level to keep the channel going. Shout out to you, Owen. Thanks a lot, man. Your help is indispensable to the channel. And join me next time when I will be looking at more OSR books. I'm not totally sure what I'll be looking at yet, but you will find out with me next Wednesday. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you guys later.